This is DD India. You are watching the Defense Dynamics and I am Danvir from New Delhi. Today we will tell you about unfolding missile war in Russia-Ukraine conflict. What is the storm shadow and which is the deadly missile with Putin that is giving shivers up the spine to many in Europe? We will tell you. Indian Army is all set to get its first Apache attack helicopter in December. Army plans to deploy them in deserts, while light combat helicopter will be deployed in the high altitude areas of Ladakh. We will tell you why is Apache for deserts and Prachand for Ladakh. Big picture in India's defense logistics, maintenance, repair and overall sector is poised for transformative expansion over next 5 years. The global aerospace giants and domestic players collaborate to establish world-class facilities here in India. It's a huge success story unfolding. We'll cover this in detail. First things first, let's review the latest situation in Europe's Russia-Ukraine war. What is the latest crisis? Why some call it a beginning of World War III, while others dismiss it as a last-minute effort to gather some bargaining ground before the disruption sets in after Donald Trump takes over as President of the United States of America. Let's recall, Trump had said he will end the war in 24 hours. So take a look at our report.
The tensions are running high as Ukraine renewed its appeal for a strong response from the West to Russia's ongoing hostility. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky kicked off the day after the intermediate-range ballistic missile strike, warning Russia remains uninterested in peace. Describing the use of new type of missile in Dnipro was a clear and a severe escalation. While Russian leader Vladimir Putin said the new projectile codenamed Oreshnik had been deployed in response to Ukraine using US and UK provided missiles to strike targets inside Russia. NATO insisted the attack in Dnipro will neither change the course of the conflict nor deter the alliance support to Kyiv. But Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said West should take Putin's warning, including the claim Russia has a stock of missiles ready to be used at face value. To many, it seems like the beginning of the Third World War. After 1,000 days, the Russia-Ukraine war has flared up. The United States and other countries have shut down embassies in Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, while several European countries are telling their citizens to prepare for war. Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic urged United States and NATO not to ignore Russian President Putin's nuclear threats. Vucic said, only those who are crazy or unfamiliar with Putin would dismiss his warning. President Vladimir Putin escalated a tense showdown with the West, saying that Russia had launched a new intermediate-range ballistic missile at Ukraine in response to Ukraine's recent use of American and British weapons to strike deeper into Russia. In what appeared to be an ominous threat against Ukraine's Western allies, Mr. Putin also asserted that Russia had the right to strike the military facilities of countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. His warning came hours after Russia's military fired a nuclear-capable ballistic missile at Ukraine that Western officials and analysts said was meant to instill fear in Kyiv and the West. Though the missile carried only conventional warheads, using it has signaled that Russia could strike with nuclear weapons if it so chooses. The regional conflict in Ukraine, previously provoked by the West, has acquired elements of global character. Mr. Putin said in a rare address to the nation, We are developing intermediate and shorter range missiles as a response to US plans to produce and deploy intermediate and shorter range missiles in Europe and the Asia Pacific region. As per Western media outlets, Russia has been stockpiling hundreds of Iskander and Kinzhal missiles for weeks to enable it to carry out strikes and thus send a psychological message ahead of transfer of power in Washington, D.C. Ukraine's capital Kyiv may have been spared on November 20th missile attack, but the message has gone through.
Some say everything appears to be a preparation for a strong position for talks with Trump and trivializing the developments, while there are many who paint an apocalyptic scenario, something the time ahead would reveal. However, the latest situation has aggravated after Ukraine used long-range Storm Shadow missiles and the American attack EMS against targets inside Russia for the first time. Zelensky did that only after US President Joe Biden gave Ukraine a go-ahead to use these long-range missiles supplied by Washington and strike inside Russia, prompting a very furious response from Kremlin. Ukraine had been using these missiles earlier for months, but only against targets inside the territory occupied by Russia, that is Crimea and Donetsk region. So let's understand what are these Storm Shadow missiles and the attack EMS.
Storm Shadow is an Anglo-French cruise missile with a maximum range of around 250 kilometers. In French, it is called Scalp. It is launched from an aircraft, then flies at close to the speed of sound, hugging the terrain before dropping down and detonating its high explosive warhead. Storm Shadow, made by manufacturer MBDA, is considered an ideal weapon for penetrating hardened bunkers and ammunition stores such as those used by Russia in its war against Ukraine. Each missile costs nearly $1 million, so they tend only to be launched as part of a carefully planned flurry of much cheaper drones sent ahead to confuse and exhaust the Russian air defenses, just as Russia does to Ukraine. They have been used with great effect, hitting Russia's Black Sea naval headquarters at Sevastopol and making the whole of Crimea unsafe for the Russian Navy. Another missile that has been used by Ukraine is the MGM-140 Army Tactical Missile System, or the Attack EMS. It is a supersonic tactical ballistic missile. It uses solid propellant and is 13 feet long, 24 inches in diameter, and the longest variant can fly up to 300 kilometers. These missiles can be fired from tracked M270 multiple launch rocket system, or the MLRS, and the wheeled M142 high mobility artillery rocket system, or the HIMARS.
To tackle this threat from the Western long-range tactical missiles, Russia had been preparing and stockpiling its own missiles to counter this inevitable threat looming for quite some time. If you recall, Zelensky had been pressing upon the United States to grant him permission to strike targets deep inside the Russian territory, while the United Kingdom and France, in support to Zelensky, have been advocating for removal of the usage restriction for long. But Europe appears divided as Germans still refuse to give Ukraine their Taurus KEPD 350 missiles. If the situation escalates, then what is up the Putin's sleeve? Let's check that out.
Oreshnik is an intermediate-range ballistic missile Russia unleashed on Ukraine on November the 20th of 2024. It is speculated that Oreshnik is a mobile, solid-fueled missile with a range between 3,000 and 5,500 kilometers. It is equipped with multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, or the MIRVs, capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds of Mach 10. According to the US Department of Defense, the Oreshnik missile is based on RS-26 Rube's design. The RS-26 is a solid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile, or the ICBM, that is a derivative of RS-24 Yars ICBM. It has a range between 2,000 and 6,000 kilometers. The RS-24 is capable of carrying MIRVs, or Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle. Russia currently relies on Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle for its hypersonic MIRV capability. The Avangard is designed to deliver nuclear or conventional payloads at a speed of Mach 20 while performing evasive maneuvers to evade missile defense. Its flexibility and speed make it a key element in Russia's hypersonic strategy.
Let's understand these Avangard hypersonic glide vehicles. Why are these the world's deadliest weapons, and why they are the most dreaded in the West and in Ukraine? Why no anti-ballistic missile system in the world can intercept these?
The Avangard missile is a Russian hypersonic glide vehicle. It can be carried as multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle, or the MIRVs, as payload of heavy intercontinental ballistic missiles such as UR-100, RS-28 Sarmat and RS-24 and 26 ICBMs. It can deliver both nuclear and conventional payloads. The Avangard is reportedly capable of traveling at re-entry speeds of over Mach 20 and close to Mach 27. The Avangard is one of the 6 new Russian strategic weapons unveiled by Russian President Vladimir Putin on March 1st of the year 2018. The hypersonic glide vehicles differ from traditional ballistic missile warheads by their ability to maneuver and operate at lower altitudes. The combination of maneuverability and high speed poses significant challenges for conventional missile defense. According to the Jane's Information Service, Avangard is a pure glide vehicle without an independent propulsion system. The glider supposedly is capable of sharp high-speed horizontal and vertical evasive maneuvers in flight, which Russian officials claim makes it invulnerable to any missile defense system. The blast yield of a nuclear warhead carried by the Avangard is reportedly of more than 2 megatons. The high speeds of Avangard likely gives it far better target penetration characteristics than subsonic cruise missiles. The Avangard weighs about 2000 kg and travels at speeds between Mach 20 and 27, giving it the equivalent of 21 ton of TNT in kinetic energy alone, excluding any explosive warhead. The other hypersonic missiles that Russians have been using in Russia-Ukraine war are the ship-launched Zircon and air-launched Kinzhal missiles.
After a delay of more than 6 months, the Army is set to receive the first batch of 3 Apache AH-64E attack helicopters from Boeing in December. While the Apaches are for deserts, the Army is all set to deploy indigenous light combat helicopter, or the LCH Prachand, in Ladakh next year.
There have been manufacturing delays due to supply chain issues. The first batch of 3 Apaches is set to be delivered in December of 2024 and the rest in the coming months of next year. As per the original schedule, 3 helicopters were supposed to be delivered in the month of May and 3 in the month of July of 2024. In March of 2024, the Army Aviation formally raised the 451 Aviation Squadron at Jodhpur that would operate the Apaches. The Apaches would be the second attack helicopter in the Indian Army after the indigenous light combat helicopter, the Prachand. The Cabinet Committee had in the past given sanction for procurement of 39 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters from the United States, as part of which Indian Air Force inducted 22 Apaches under a deal signed in September of 2015. The government decided that future Apache procurements would go to the Army. While the Army has been pushing the case of 11 more Apaches, the Chief of Defence Staff had ordered a study to identify the requirement of attack helicopters by the three services in support of the requirement of 39 heavy attack helicopters. The delayed Apache attack helicopters are not the Indian Army's first choice of high-altitude warfare. Instead, the indigenously developed light combat helicopter Prachand will start getting deployed in Ladakh along the Chinese border in the year 2025. Armed with fire and forget Hellfire missiles, Apache can track up to 128 targets a minute and prioritize threats. The missiles equip the gunship with heavy anti-armor capability. The Indian Apache, the AH-64E Guardian version, features a more powerful engine, better data networking, and improved composite rotor blades. These helicopters will help India strengthen its posture against Pakistan. They are best suited attack helicopters for India's plains and desert sectors on the western border. The Indian Air Force has already inducted Apache in its fleet. The IAF has deployed its Apache attack helicopters in Ladakh to provide tactical support to the ground forces when needed. However, the helicopters' operability on the upper reaches of Himalayas has been questioned. This is where the indigenous light combat helicopter, the Prachand, will factor in. Prachand has a higher operational envelope as it is specifically designed for high-altitude conditions. The AH-64 Apache and HAL's light combat helicopter Prachand are both multi-role attack helicopters with 2 seats. However, the difference is in the range and service ceiling. The range of LCH is up to 700 km, while that of Apache is 480 km. As far as service ceiling goes, LCH can climb up to 6,500 meters, while Apache can fly at a ceiling of 6,400 meters, which is 100 meters lesser than the LCH.
Backed by policy reforms and maturing industrial base, India's aircraft maintenance, repair and overall sector over next 5 years is to undergo a major transformation. This sector will feature new MRO facilities, increased induction of defense platforms for in-country maintenance, and a growing role of local suppliers supporting these global defense original equipment manufacturers, or the OEMs. Not only will this generate employment, but also boost India's human resource with skills in handling defense-related high-end technologies. This manpower in turn would come out handy in India's indigenous defense industry as it grows.
With companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing partnering with Indian firms like Tata Advanced Systems Limited and AI Engineering Service Limited, the foundation is being laid to establish India as a regional hub for military aviation maintenance. Nick Smith, the Director of Air Mobility and Maritime Missions International Campaigns at Lockheed Martin, describes the coming 5 years as a prove-it phase for India's defense MRO capabilities. He also notes that the recent spate in announcement in sector by global OEMs like Dassault Aviation, Boeing, and his own company, Lockheed Martin, are lagging indicators of years of planning and effort, aligning the government's Make in India vision. Lockheed, in partnership with TASL, plans to establish an MRO facility for the C-130J Super Hercules aircraft, with the first induction for maintenance scheduled for year 2027. Boeing too is preparing to scale its operations in India Salil Gupte, president of Boeing India and South Asia, emphasizes the growing scope of MRO services for defense platform. The foundation of defense MRO expansion over next 5 years is already in place. Critical technical work, including heavy maintenance for commercial platforms like 737 MAX airliner and defense platforms like P-8I maritime patrol aircraft, is already being carried out in India. The focus now is on scaling these capabilities further, he says. Industry players highlight that next 5 years will be pivotal to India's defense MRO sector as it transforms from planning to execution. The success will depend on timely completion of facilities, efficient induction of platforms, and ability to scale up the operations. Backed by strong policy support, strategic collaborations, and a growing local ecosystem, India possesses the building blocks to establish itself as regional hub for defense aviation maintenance. Some of the recent announcements made for establishment of MRO facilities were done in August 2024, where Boeing and AIESL are to partner to provide in-country critical components MRO for Navy's P-8I fleet. In September 2024, Dassault Aviation announced that it is all set to expand its India footprint with new MRO facility near the upcoming Delhi-Noida International Airport at Jewar. The OEM plans to use this facility for maintenance and overhaul of Rafale and Mirage 2000 fighter aircrafts. Lockheed Martin and TASL. Also in September of 2024, Lockheed Martin and TASL signed a teaming agreement to explore setting up an MRO facility in India for IAF and global C-130J fleets.
With this, we come to the end of this episode, but before I go, here is my take. The war in Ukraine stands at a perilous crossroad with escalating violence and shifting dynamics threatening regional and global stability. After months of intense conflict, both Ukraine and Russia face mounting human, economic, and military costs. While Ukraine seeks to reclaim its territories and protect its sovereignty, Russia shows no sign of retreat, further entrenching these hostilities. The international community remains divided, with NATO allies ramping up military aid to Ukraine, while Russia strengthens its alliance with states like Iran and North Korea. This external involvement raises fears of the conflict expanding into broader confrontation, destabilizing the region further. Diplomatic efforts have largely been stalled, with peace negotiations overshadowed by entrenched mistrust and mutual blame. Meanwhile, civilian populations bear the brunt of the conflict, facing displacement, energy shortages, and humanitarian crisis. The situation demands a renewed international focus on de-escalation, while balancing Ukraine's right to self-defense with calls for dialogue is crucial. Russian insecurities have also to be addressed. Without urgent action, this war risks spiraling into a prolonged, unpredictable phase, endangering not only Ukraine, but the wider international order. The coming months will be critical in determining the path forward. So with this, see you next week with new stories and their analysis. Thanks for watching, and do post your comments on social media with #DD with Danvir. Goodbye and take care.